The hard path of gratitude. It's easy for people to adopt an attitude of cynicism and resentment towards the world. Rarely does anything pan out as one expects, and this inherent variability can lead to anxiety, mistakes, and loss. This suffering is something that everyone encounters, but people differ in their response to the suffering. Those who become cynical wish to avoid direct confrontation with painful reality. One can understand this, as we've all experienced setbacks, disappointments, and betrayals. It takes a special kind of person to stare into the abyss and not become a monster. The capacity to maintain dignity in the face of adversity cannot be easily explained in terms of environment or material wealth, as you can find people of both admirable and despicable character amongst the rich and poor. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. noted that people generally had one of three negative reactions when their hopes and dreams were not realized. Some became detached, cold, and uninterested. Others allowed their resentment to fill their spirit as they cursed God and those around them. A final group is that of the fatalistic types who believe that everything was predetermined and no amount of individual will could change the course of reality. None of these responses are helpful or optimal. Ask yourself, if you saw someone embodying this response, would you want to imitate them? Would you want to live your life in such a manner that your character starts to mold towards the weak and cowardice spirits of the cynical nihilist? Dr. King believed that while God has a plan, humans also have free will. He wrote, "Freedom is the act of deliberating, deciding, and responding within our destined nature. Even though destiny may prevent our going to some attractive Spain, we do have the capacity to accept such a disappointment, to respond to it, and to do something about the disappointment itself." When we face chaos, when life doesn't go the way we want it to, we open ourselves up to a set of attitudes we should adopt. I believe that one of the proper attitudes we should manifest is one of gratitude. What exactly is gratitude? Why can it be difficult to maintain this attitude? What benefits does a gratitude based mindset offer? These are the questions I want to walk through in this paper. Gratitude is the process of acknowledging the good in your life. It's the mindset that involves recognition of the potential benevolence of reality as well as its instantiations in your world. It is to appreciate the obstacles that were removed from your path as well as the obstacles that were placed in front of you. Existence is suffering, yet despite this fact, we can find meaning in how we relate to the tragedy and malevolence. This partly occurs because meaning is always found between the observer and the environment, which means that we bring something to bear on the world just as the world bears on us. In other words, to wrestle with reality is to prove that you are alive, and this evidence, no matter what its form, is a gift. One might say that there is suffering so bitter and painful that it can make a person wish they were dead. While that's true, it's not obvious where the breaking point is as it differs for each person. There are people with fame, power, and intelligence who are slaves to all of the wrong gods and wish to put it all to an end. There are also people who have nothing, whose next meal is uncertain, and yet find meaning in the struggle for survival, especially when they fight alongside loved ones. Just as suffering has an unspecified threshold, so too does gratitude. One's capacity to find gratitude across a wide range of circumstances is associated with the virtue of their character. While there are innate factors that play into the individual's faculty of gratitude, one can also practice being grateful and learn to foster it as a skill. When something good happens to us, we can demonstrate gratitude by striving to do something good for someone else. We can also take the time to note in our minds that this thing that just happened is good. Of course, life is complicated, and the things that happen to us are often laced with both a positive and negative valence. To express gratitude is not to ignore the very real bad things that can happen, nor is it to delude oneself into believing that all bad things are actually good things in disguise. It is to appreciate the good and attend to the bad in a manner that at least doesn't make things any worse than they have to be. It is the deliberate decision to voluntarily confront the setback or obstacle with the character that others, or your past self, would admire. This is easier said than done. A few reasons come to mind as to why it's so difficult to be grateful. Psychological research done by Dr. Daniel Kahneman and Dr. Amos Tversky indicate that people are naturally more inclined to weigh negative outcomes more than positive outcomes of the same magnitude. The pleasure of gaining $100 is less than the pain of losing the same amount. One of the reasons for this could be that people can only feel so good, but if an outcome is bad enough, it can mean certain death. We've evolved to be more attuned to the negative because an overreaction to it is a better survival strategy than a neutral or underreaction. Ignorance can be another reason. As we go on living our lives, we can become blind to all of the sacrifices that others have made to get us where we are. We may also be unaware of the fact that there's always someone, somewhere in the world, that has it worse than us. This is completely understandable, as our experience drives our expectations. Those of us who grew up without having to worry about food, or had loving parents, or were lucky enough to be born relatively healthy, may have to go out of our way to understand deeper forms of suffering and realize how bad things can be. While understandable, this is not an excuse, as suffering comes for everyone. People of the West are filled with assumptions that drive our behavior. When we walk outside, we don't expect to be violently attacked by a stranger. When we go to the grocery store, we expect there to be food available at a moderate price. When we pursue our career interests, we expect a meritocratic system that rewards competence, discipline, and intelligence. We don't typically think about what it would look like if crime skyrocketed, or if the supply chain system collapsed, or if the job market became a form of unfair slavery. More importantly, we don't typically think about the work it took to set up the systems that benefit our lives each and every day. This blindness makes it easier for us to become spoiled and complacent. Despite the difficulty of practicing gratitude, one should strive to keep it at the forefront. A mindset of gratitude makes life better, not just for you, but for everyone around you. One may argue that being grateful can cloud your vision and make you overly optimistic, but the contrary is true if the practice is done correctly. To be grateful is in part to realize how harsh the world actually is. It's to wrestle with the fragility of civilization and the unpredictability of nature. One cannot be naive about the nature of existence and simultaneously grateful for what they have and what they potentially could do. A deep understanding of suffering is what separates real gratitude from a shallow and diluted happiness. You have choices when you get knocked down. One choice is to take stock of yourself and attend to your insufficiencies that led to your temporary downfall. You can then work to close those gaps and continue the pursuit of your goal. This pattern of thought and behavior resembles the archetypal hero. People admire this mode of adaptation, and they love having examples of this type of character in their lives so they can imitate them. To act in such a manner is to be a boon for society. It helps you become wise and ensure that the sacrifices of those that came before you and helped you get this far were not made in vain. An alternative choice is to blame the world entirely and become cynical and resentful. How helpful is this attitude? How do you feel when you see someone adopt zero responsibility for a negative outcome? How wise is it to expect anything to change for the better if the source of the change is believed to be completely outside of the individual's control? There's nothing to be grateful for with this attitude, nor is there an accurate perception of reality. People who do not practice gratitude fail to realize the good in the world. They fail to realize how easily things can slip into regression and despair. Why act at all if one is not aware of the ephemerality of stability and growth? Which attitude do you think will lead to higher levels of human flourishing? Reality can be viewed as order and chaos. Order is the predictable stability that can protect us from anxiety, and it can also be the tyranny that stifles growth. Chaos is the novelty and potential from which adaptation manifests, but it can also outpace us, causing crippling anxiety. When facing order or chaos, whether it manifests as positive or negative, is partly dependent on how one attends to it. How we see the world largely determines how we act, and if we want to adopt a pattern of behavior that is good, we need to understand how the good can reveal itself to us. To find the positive in a situation is an active process, which means becoming grateful is also an active decision. Dr. Viktor Frankl said it best: everything can be taken from a man, but one thing, the last of the human freedom. To choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way.